Tools for statistical analyses. So there are a number of tools for statistical analyses, and one of the main ones are the spreadsheet software. So spreadsheet software like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or LibreOffice or other kinds of spreadsheet software provide user-friendly interfaces with intuitive and flexible design for data analyses and for data manipulation. And there are cells and there's cell referencing, which you can use, and it allows for a very flexible way to manipulate the data. These programs like Microsoft Excel often provide various statistical functions. So simple things like median, average, standard deviation calculations, but also more complex types of statistical analyses. And there are often multiple visualization features. So there are ways to create graphs, bar charts, and other kinds of graphs as well for the data you're using. Microsoft Excel uses the native data format is .xls and .xlsx. Those are the two main data types that Microsoft Excel uses of their own, but they also accept other data types. Microsoft Excel can import various other data formats, including CSV, which is the main one for data analysis. And notice that we're talking about importing. And I'm going to emphasize this because you need to import the data when you're opening CSV files and not just double click on it. CSV stands for comma separated value. It's a simple text file with numbers and text that identify each new line is a row of an individual or an instance, and all that follows are sequence of attributes. So these are no columns exactly when we look at a CSV file, if it's a real true CSV, meaning separated by a comma, because sometimes it can be separated by other symbols, like sometimes even a tab or something else. But in this case, notice how we don't see columns. I see Chen, comma, Kobe, comma, number. So the columns are not visible here, but the program, whatever computer program you're using, can process, and every time it sees a comma, it just knows that it begins a new attribute. So it knows that it has three attributes here, first, the second, and the third. In this case, notice that there is no name for the attributes. What is this one, and what's the second one? What's the third one? Is this first name, last name, and phone number? It's not clear because it's not written, but usually in the CSV file, the first line is the header information, the names of the attributes. And here's an example of where we see that. So the first line, agency, level, earliest, and latest post, and all the other attributes that follow, all the other instances or rows that follow are the data itself, the instances of whatever observational unit we're dealing with. Each CSV file is the same as a single table, rows of individuals, columns of attributes. So if we have multiple tables, usually you have multiple CSV files. You don't have multiple tables in one CSV file. As a single table, all rows will refer to the same unit of analysis, the same observational unit. Here in this file here, notice that this is not tweets. This is not tweets, but this is agencies. So these are screen names for agencies and with some other kinds of attributes. So the observational unit always got to keep in mind what it is that you're dealing with. There are different programs you can use for basic data viewing and maybe even data editing. So this one here, Sublime Text. There's Notepad++. Notice that sometimes you have to use word wrap, or do you want to see word wrap? And so here, this one referring to the first row. And then here we have word wrap, because I can tell because it's wrapping here, and then the second record is only begin here. This is the second line. Each line is a record. That's how the structure of the CSV. So if you go into another line, that's another record. So this is not going to another line. It's just that the visualization in this program, Notepad++, was changed to be word wrap. So you might want to play around with that. And here got changed back to not word wrap. And you see that every record, as it should be, is in a line. To open and manipulate a CSV directly, it's usually best to not use basic Notepad or text edit. Use Sublime Text or Notepad++ if you have to. Always import your CSV data rather than double clicking on it to open with Excel. This will ensure the CSV file encoding is not corrupted. File encoding is very important, and importing the data is very important. Don't double click on CSV to open with Excel, please. CSV files, like any text file, are encoded by some standard. Encoding is the method of translating characters into machine language. Remember, computers all deal with zeros and ones, so you have to translate somehow zeros and ones to the characters that we deal with in our English language or whatever other language you're using, Chinese, Swahili, and so on. The most common encoding are ASCII for Western content and UTF-8, Unicode format for all else. So UTF-8 is very common, and usually you want to know what the encoding of your data is to import it. Some programs will just assume that it's UTF-8, some will not. So always be careful about that. Make sure, once again, to always check encoding or file origin when importing CSV files in Spreadsheet Software. Of course, this assumes what the encoding of your file is. So you can assume generally that it is UTF-8, but not always the case. When you import data into Microsoft Excel, it's usually the default. They kind of are going to assume that the default is some Western European Windows something. But and maybe you can get away with that, but you got to check. Usually file encoding is UTF-8, so you might want to go here and change it to UTF-8 and then load your data. Look at the data here, and do you see any strange characters? Pause the video and see if you see anything funky and wrong. Okay, I'm going to show you. Clearly, there's some strange characters here. And right here, trademark. It's like a European Union money sign and then trademark and showed up here. Why is that? This was not part of the text. This was not part of the data. The problem is that this data was imported into Word with the wrong encoding. The right encoding was not determined. And then therefore, Excel could not translate the data properly, could not import the data properly, and just put some funky characters there. So be careful with data encoding. Always formally upload or import your data instead of just double clicking on it, and make sure that you select the right encoding for your data. Okay. Lastly, best tools for statistical analyses. There is the R software and programming language that we're going to be using. There's Python and related statistical libraries. There's Tableau, there's SPSS, there's SAS, there's a bunch of others, and there's Microsoft Excel. So there's a number of tools out there. Some are proprietary, some are costly, some are free, some are better than others, some are used in some traditions. For example, psychology people use SPSS. I think economists use Stata, which is another one. Public health biostatisticians use SAS, and so on. But R is really well regarded, and it's open source, so it's one of the top ones to use. Okay, that's it for this one. See you next time.